Okay, here is the introductory PowerPoint for the unit on gender. If you have the newest textbook, my students at Scott High School, it should be chapter 11. So this is where we're heading next. We are also going to talk about social class, which is chapter 10. We're kind of skipping around a little bit. So we're going to do the stuff on gender first. So you'll need to be reading the chapter in your book that deals with gender. Now, I'm going to talk to you about the differences between gender and sex. A lot of people think that they're the same things, or they're the same constructs, or the same concepts, and they actually are very different. Sex is a biological phenomenon. Sex refers to biologically being male or female. Most of us, are born either being male or female biologically. Gender, on the other hand, refers specifically to how we assign roles, or how we define being male or female. So gender is a social or cultural construction involving how roles are assigned to being male or female. So we're going to talk a lot about the different nuances of gender. We're not going to talk about sex as much as we're going to talk about gender in this unit. Now, the ideas or notions about what is gender appropriate will vary from place to place. We have very specific ideas within our culture about what it means to be a man, or what it means to be a woman. And if you stray away from or go outside of that accepted box of what it means to be a man or a woman, then there can be consequences. And again, how we define masculine, or being a man, or feminine, or being a woman, in our society here in the United States, within our mainstream culture, can be very different than how other people in other parts of the world do so. And we'll talk about that. Ladies, I'll ask you a question first. How many of you feel this would be an appropriate role for women? Prostitution, what we're talking about. And gentlemen, you can chime in on this as well. You can think, is this an appropriate role for women? I have a feeling most of you would say, no, this is not appropriate. I'm a father of a teenage girl. If you ask me that question, my answer is going to be no, not appropriate at all. However, in some parts of the world, in some parts of this country even, it is considered appropriate. It is not seen as being as deviant, if you will. We'll talk about what that means. I was giving this lecture in one of my intro classes some years ago, and I had a gentleman who served our country. He was in the military, and he was at West Virginia State University taking a class, on campus. And we were talking about this idea of gender and prostitution, and he told a story. He said, Mr. Dean, if I can tell you a story about Amsterdam when I was serving our country overseas, there's a specific part of Amsterdam called the Red Light District where prostitution is legal. You can actually window shop. Ladies and gentlemen, if you've ever been to a mall, you've probably looked at different stores. You may go to one store and look at a sweater or a pair of boots or some tennis shoes and say, yeah, those look pretty good. I might come back and buy those. Then you move to the next store and you think, well, I'll compare prices. But these shoes are cheaper here at this store than they are at the first store I looked at. And you window shop. You compare products, and then you make your purchasing decision. He said it's the same thing with prostitutes. Men will literally walk by the windows in these buildings and select the woman that they want to engage with. And the idea and the notion of that seems far-fetched to us. I know it did to me when he was explaining this. I can't imagine going into Charleston or Huntington and seeing men window shopping for prostitutes because it's not legal here, and it's not seen as being gender appropriate. This is not an appropriate role for respectable women, if you will, within our society. And he went on to explain that, some more images of the red light district of Amsterdam, that his friend actually, he said this was not him personally, but his friend actually purchased a service, and they issued him a receipt. Yes, a receipt. Can you imagine going home and showing your wife, gentlemen, a receipt for this kind of service? I couldn't get my mind around that. He said that the prostitutes had to post a clean bill of health, just like restaurants have to kind of post their grades for their sanitary conditions. Women have to post and make public or available to the buyer, if you will, their health to make sure that they're clean, so they can show that they're clean. And you get a receipt for your service like you would if you bought those tennis shoes or those boots or that sweater. So that notion of gender, that being appropriate, would really sort of upset the way we think within our country or culture about women and the role of women. Gender stratification. This is the unequal distribution of wealth, power, and privilege between men and women. We're going to talk about social stratification after we talk about gender. Stratification simply refers to the layers that exist, the layers of inequality that exist within society. Historically, even into today, I don't care what part of history you look at, what country you look at, what part of history, the time in history, men have always enjoyed more power, more wealth, more privilege than women. Now, are men biologically born being superior to women? Are guys, are we smarter? Are we more capable of working? Are we more worthy of higher incomes? No, not really, no. But somewhere along the way, we've decided that men have and should have more status than women. I'll give you a great example. Right now, as you're reading this in our country, women make 81 cents for every male dollar for doing exactly the same job. I don't care what category you're looking at, doctors, lawyers, sanitary technicians, servers, it doesn't matter. Men always make more money. So why is that? There's not a law that says men shall make more money than women within this country or any other country, but it seems to be, that seems to be the norm, and that seems to be the way that it happens. So we'll talk about that. I'm going to skip through some of these. There we go. Don't worry about the couple slides I just zipped through. You're not going to need to know that. But you do need to know these. Now we have instrumental traits or roles. These are traits that are generally associated with males. They describe people or individuals who act on the world and influence the world. These are people who take control, characteristics associated with people who take charge. They act on things and cause things to change. And these traits have historically been assigned to men, whereas expressive traits or roles are traits associated with women or females. They describe emotional functioning, individuals who value interpersonal relationships, networking. And again, these are roles that have been assigned. These aren't biological components of men and women, but they've been assigned to men and women, and we kind of fall in line with that. Now, gender stereotypes. These are broad categories that reflect our impressions and beliefs about males and females. All gender stereotypes refer to this image or this idea of what a typical member of a particular social category is like. We don't stereotype people just based on gender. We stereotype based on race. When you think of the stereotypical African American, some specific things come to the mind of society when we're talking about stereotypes. You can probably imagine what they are. I could throw out any category of people: African Americans, nerds, jocks, preppy people, homosexuals, whatever. We could do it in terms of race, ethnicity, choice, preference, whatever. And we have these stereotypical images of what these people are supposed to look like, how they're supposed to act, and if they don't, we think something's wrong. And we certainly do this with gender. We'll talk about that. And again, don't pay attention to that. Here we go. Now, do pay attention to this. Gender stereotypes. The idea that men and boys were supposed to be strong, we're supposed to be physical, take charge, dominant. We're informally taught and socialized to be this way as boys. And girls are socialized to be soft, to be nurturing, to network, to communicate, and not to be as aggressive, to not be as independent. You may think I'm talking crazy stuff here, but that's still largely the way that gender socialization begins from birth at this country. We start unknowingly as parents, in the media, as society, socializing our children into these specific roles based on gender. And we're going to talk more about that here in a second. Children understand gender stereotypes by the time they enter kindergarten. So they start to understand these stereotypical images and ideas of what it means to be a man, what it means to be a woman. And this understanding grows throughout the elementary school years. They begin to understand that gender stereotypes don't always apply either. We'll talk about that as we go here as well. Here's some data, more data that ties into gender stereotypes. 30.8% of speaking characters are women in popular movies and dramas in the entertainment industry. 28.8% of women wore sexually revealing clothes on popular television shows and in movies. Only 7% of men do. So why? Guys, do we just want to see women more scantily clad? And are women just not that interested in seeing men naked? I don't know. Or are women taught that it's not okay to talk about wanting to see men who are scantily clad or naked? Guys, men, are we taught and socialized to talk about women and their bodies and how attractive they may or may not be? Definitely it's more okay for guys to talk about that kind of stuff than it is for girls. Society has set up these rules, not we as individuals. Society has kind of put that out there. 26.2% of women actors get partially nude, while only 9.4% of men do. So we're kind of seeing some of this idea of gender stereotyping, the idea that men can talk about sex more. It's more okay for them to want to see naked women, but it's not as okay for women to want to see men who are partially nude. It's not as okay to express that. So, are men and women treated differently based upon their gender or their sex? I'm going to go ahead and call that the end of this part, and we'll pick up the second part of this presentation with this slide.